One of the things that people often talk about these days in a kind of culture wars way is socialism. And socialism, is, I think, is seen as a thing where you basically lose all your possessions and it goes in a group pot and you all live in a
Mm,
tiny room and you're
mm.
not allowed a car. Can you explain socialism as a concept as you understand it?
Yeah, well, socialism is not anarchism, certainly not the anarchism I believe in. Socialism is equality granted by the state. It requires a strong state to coerce that condition of equality, to tax the rich in order to give to others. You may believe that that's right. I personally do, but I don't believe the state should be coercing anybody into that position. This is the fundamental division at the origins of communism between an anarchistic view of communism, where the people decide, to what became the dominant communist view, the Bolshevik view, which is the state decides. A small group of government people who claim to speak for the people, they take the decisions, allegedly on behalf of the proletariat. And they don't, of course. They form their own elite, self-dealing, self-serving set of interests. They get the big flats, the nice cars, the privileges, and everybody else can, have the scraps. In a way, it's a weird imitation of capitalism in that it divides society. It produces elite groups who dominate everybody else. But socialism and capitalism also share another interesting feature, is that they're always about welfare for everybody in the future. In capitalism, wealth is supposed to trickle down to everybody. We're all supposed to be better off in the end, in the future. In socialism, again, it's a promise of a future paradise of equality and liberation of the proletariat. It never quite seems to happen now. Anarchism is about today. It's about this moment between me and you right now. And that's what makes it very powerful and very relevant, and I would argue better as a political philosophy than the alternatives.
What's the difference between, say, socialism in your description and communism?
Well, there's not much difference. I mean, if you could argue that socialism is a slightly less aggressive form of communism. Communism, all assets are held by the state. All the means of production are held by the state. Factories, roads, police, everything is controlled by the state. Socialism, at least in the European, Western European version of it, not everything is owned by the state, but many things are owned by the state, and there is a philosophy of redistribution. The rich should pay for the poor, and to a degree, most social democrat governments, including the government we got today in Britain, believes that the rich are taxed more. Some ways they're not. Wealth holders, capital holders are not taxed as much as income earners. That's a mistake, but basically, people are taxed in order to provide public services for everybody, such as the National Health Service. So there's a degree of socialist philosophy behind that. But communism is a much more all-embracing view of the state being in control of everything.
One term that's thrown around, I think, by the right online at the moment is socialism as a dirty word. People are accused of constantly being socialist without maybe a full understanding of what that means. But I think it's also fair to say fascism is thrown around a lot. People accuse different governments of being fascist, our own government of being fascist, potentially without a full understanding of what that actually entails as well. So maybe if you could explain that to us.
Well, fascism is essentially anti-democratic. It is about the rule of one person or a small group of people over everybody else. They legitimize or attempt to legitimize their rule by claiming that they're speaking for the mass. Often they make the claim that they're speaking for the little guy, often a guy who has been ignored by the previous dispensation. I stand for you. This is Trump's claim. I stand for the ordinary man who has been ignored, who deserves a crack of the whip, who is a true American, unlike these other people who are not true Americans. And in the name of that ideology, of that set of beliefs, they basically destroy the institutions of the civil state. So they destroy government institutions, they populate them with ideologues like them, they destroy the rule of law. Trump has just pardoned all these January 6th insurrectionists, some of whom assaulted very severely police officers, and Trump has released them from prison. So he's destroying the rule of law for his own supporters. His own supporters are given a different law than everybody else. So this is how fascism begins to assert itself and create a different kind of state. Because it's not freedom. It's important to note that even though it claims to offer freedom, it exerts itself through coercion. So one example is Trump is sending the army down to the Mexican border. Immigration people will be sent to workplaces to arrest and deport people who are supposedly illegal migrants. The state will surveil people. It will control more and more and more, and the tools of control have become much more powerful than they used to be. So that's what fascism is.
It's thrown around a lot as a term. Do you think it's hyperbole to sort of say that America is sliding towards fascism, or is that what you think is happening?
No, it's not hyperbole. It's exactly what's happening. It's not just me. Mark Milley, the former head of the Chiefs of Staff, the most senior military officer in America, has said that Trump is fascist to his core. So this isn't a controversial view. You can see it precisely. It's happening in plain view. The destruction of the rule of law, the hatred of the other, the rendering of other people as the enemy, even political enemies, political opponents as enemies, the previous president as enemies who should be prosecuted, who should be persecuted, dividing society, accruing more and more control to the dictator who is Trump.
We're in Britain, so I should ask this. What's the difference between fascism and a monarchy?
Well, of course, in the old days, monarchy was fascism. It was all power in the hands of one person, King Henry VIII, distributed a little bit to his courtiers and acolytes. So that was a fascist state in essence. But today's monarch doesn't have that power, is subordinate to it, will only enact the wishes of Parliament and the government of the day, at least in theory. Though in law, I think the monarch is still primus inter pares. Not primus inter pares, is just primus, is the dominant sovereign, which is ridiculous that we're, the royal family is an embarrassing absurdity.
Not a fan.
No.
You've worked in the areas of the government that we don't get to see. You've had information from the departments that we don't get to hear. Do you think the average member of the public is more closely monitored than they think, or less monitored than they think they are?
Oh, they're far more monitored than they think. Far more monitored. Intelligence agencies are now developing or have AI that will profile every one of us, from our public presence, our profile on social media, what we do publicly, our movements. All of this can be deduced from your mobile phone. They don't even have to have your phone. When you drive, your car is automatically monitored by cameras capturing your registration plate. CCTV cameras are ubiquitous. There's more cameras here than there is in any other country, I think, apart from China. So it is a surveillance state. The government can know almost everything about you if it wishes. If it wishes to investigate you more deeply, it can find out more or less everything about you, even if you're entirely innocent of any crime. I mean, one might argue, people would claim that this is all about crime prevention, but it's not just about crime prevention. I think political control will come with it. It's already used as a tool of political control in China, that there is even a social scoring by the government where you score better for being a better citizen, giving you better access to travel or to credit, housing, according to how well you behave. It is not a stretch to think that that could happen in our own society. Indeed, to a degree, it already happens with things like credit scores, which are much more important in the US than they are here. But your credit score determines your ability to live independently in a financial sense, your ability to get mortgages, loans, a credit card.
One of the things that people are always talking about is our phone listening to us? Are they listening to us to monitor us or to serve us better adverts or things like that? Some people say no, it's illegal, they're not allowed to. Do you have any sort of view on that kind of thing?
Of course it's listening to us.
Oh.
I mean, they take every piece of data they possibly can. If you have Alexa, it's listening to you all the time. If you have Siri on your phone is listening to you all the time. that data doesn't belong to you the moment it enters your phone. It belongs to Apple, Facebook, Amazon, whomever. And of course, they're going to use it to sell to you. But that data is also accessible to government agencies. If you use Microsoft Word or Microsoft as your email exchange server, Microsoft, all that has to happen is that the American government sends one letter to Microsoft saying, we need access to your data about so-and-so. And Microsoft is legally obliged to hand it over, and it will hand it over.
Really?
And it doesn't tell you that it's handing it over. Yeah, it's one letter. It's called a national security letter. It came about after 9/11, where the so-called Patriot Act enacted the biggest curtailment of civil liberties that there has been in America. And that act has not been lifted.
What do you think about text messages? You know, one of the things about stuff like WhatsApp is people say it's encrypted end to end, so it's impossible.
It's bollocks. WhatsApp is owned by Microsoft, and they can hand over your data to anybody, to the US government. I mean, it's a US organization. Encrypted end to end, I don't believe it. In any case, government can decrypt a lot. I don't know if they can decrypt WhatsApp. I suspect they can. Or they can get access to your phone itself and not have to worry about encryption. They can see what you type in. I don't use WhatsApp for sensitive messages. I don't think they're terribly interested in most of us. I hope they're not terribly interested in me. You know, I'm just a minnow. What can I do? And, you know, I hope they use it to look at extremist groups of whatever kind. I'm fascinated by these reality police shows like 24 Hours in Police Custody, or even, what's it called, The Chase, The Hunt, where they release people. And you see some of this at work, how easy it is, even for people who know about the technology, who are not working for the state, to access this data about us, where we move to, who our friends are. They can do, on anybody, they can do network analysis where they work out where you spend most of your time, who you're most in touch with, what forms of communication you're using. That's like that for them.
Can you just explain to us some other systems of government that could work?
Well, anarchy is a rejection of the current system. It's very different from the current system, but it is very plausible and it is very doable. It's dismissed as implausible and impractical and idealistic, utopian, all these ways that people dismiss actually what would be better for us. And it is working in an extraordinary place in northeast Syria called Rojava, where they put these ideas into practice of bottom-up democracy, where decisions are taken at the communal, like the village or the neighborhood level. All decisions are taken there except decisions that require greater scale, where decisions are taken by regional assemblies of representatives appointed at the communal level and recallable by the communal level. So decisions flow from the bottom up, and they're only administered from the top down. Whereas in our system, decisions are made at the top by a tiny group of people, and they're administered at the bottom. So it's an inversion of our current system to give agency back, to give democratic control to everyone. And it could be done in Britain. It could happen quite fast, where, say you got a local councillor elected who said, I'm actually going to turn all my decisions over to a popular forum. They're going to make the decisions. The people of this town are going to make the decisions. I'm not going to tell them what I think is best. They're going to tell me. And that's what they've done in Frome, East Somerset, of all places. You know, this quiet market town, they are doing precisely this. It's not really very much talked about, but a group of people have all got elected as independents and have started some time ago to turn over their decisions to a popular assembly of people. This is a better way of doing business. It can happen. We are so used to the entrenched system we've got. We think it's immutable. Well, nothing is immutable. This is coming to an end, what we have now. And it's coming to an end right now in a bad way through the rise of the far right and anti-democratic fascistic forces. We see them on the rise in the US, of course, but also across Europe, and it's going to happen here. It is already happening here. I think anybody realizing that we're all human and have to live rubbing shoulders with each other knows intuitively that it is better to come to a compromise directly with each other, to negotiate that status quo with each other. Otherwise, what's the alternative? Somebody dominates somebody else, and that is a relationship of violence. Domination is to be rejected in all of its forms.
Where we previously worked, Lad Bible, it was the biggest youth social publisher in the world. We had a lot of contact with young people and see the messages they send, and they're quite disillusioned in general, and they feel worried about the future, and they feel worried about what capitalism means. A lot of them can't afford mortgages, can't they come out of university with debt and can't get jobs. What's your message to them?
I sympathize is my first message. You are absolutely right to feel anxious and alarmed on several different fronts. I'm sorry to say, and I don't want to add to your anxiety, but there are things you can do to start to assert your own future, to start to control your own future through these acts of agency, of withdrawing your consent to the things that control us, whether from the government or from capitalist enterprises. You can organize a strike to take over your company. That's a radical thing to do, but it's perfectly possible. People have done it in other countries. We're bullied into believing that we can't do anything anymore, that we're completely passive, that the only political action we're allowed is to vote. And that's not true. We can protest, we can demonstrate, we can build things that are different. Different forms of decision-making, a forum at our workplace, a forum for our local school, for our university, which includes everybody, where we take decisions that will be legitimate because everybody is included. So there is stuff that can be done, but we've got to learn from each other and learn these techniques. Above all, I would say don't be passive. Don't just let this happen. It is going to be bad if we do let this happen.
Overall, about the future, do you personally feel optimistic or pessimistic?
Obviously, like most thinking people, a mix of both. The pessimism is very easy: climate disaster, fascism, etc. But I also think we're in a time of great change. I didn't used to think this. When I first started with these ideas 20 years ago, people were very committed to kind of Obama and Blair and the middle way, and a belief in the stability and the triumph of representative democracy and capitalism. The end of history, as Francis Fukuyama rather foolishly put it. But I think there is a much greater sense of turmoil now. And in some ways, that's a good thing, because turmoil opens up possibility, that people are open to ideas. I do find with young people, they're much, much more open to new ideas than they ever were, because they're disillusioned and distressed by the status quo for very good reasons. And that means there is now a possibility of change, and change can happen very fast. I think that's clear from the Arab Spring or from other events. The actions of one person can trigger system-wide changes in a complex system, which is what we live in. That so-called phase change can be triggered by a very small group of people or even one individual. So I think there's great potential in the current moment. But it does require us to think critically, to think for ourselves, to really think deeply about what we are as humans and what life we want to live. Do we want to live as drones in a capitalist system? Do we want to live subjected to decisions made by others, or do we want to be free?